A simple pawn. This is how the journey began. I wanted to build a fully functioning chessboard in Minecraft, one where the pieces actually resemble their real counterparts. So let's get into the architecture, the design, and the technical challenges it took to make this a reality. Let's do a quick summary of how this machine works. I'll break down exactly what's going on in the intro of the video. You pull a lever on the tile you want to move, then pull a lever on the tile you want to move too. This procs the board to pull down the chess piece and then send a flying machine from the opposite end of the board to grab the back half of your chess piece. It then pulls it all the way back to the tile you want to end up at. At the same time, once the pulling flying machine grabs the back half of the chess piece, it signals another flying machine on the other side of the board to come push the remaining half of the chess piece onto the final tile. Once both halves of the chess piece are at the final location, we push the chess piece up and the flying machines get stationed back on the edge of the board. And just like every redstoner when describing their builds, this was pretty simple actually. Looking at the entirety of the board, it can seem absolutely overwhelming to comprehend. But if we strip away most of the board, we can see that it's really just made up of multiple individual tiles, which I will refer to as smart tiles. Each smart tile can further be broken into multiple systems, 3 systems to be exact. First, we have the mechanical system. This has the loading and unloading stations, as well as all the stoppers for the flying machines. Secondly, we have our logical system. This is the heart of the entire smart tile and keeps track of the order we send messages to the flying machines and the mechanical system. It ensures that everything runs smoothly and in the proper timing. Lastly, we have the location decoding system. This was installed purely for handling diagonals. Since the logical system has its own smaller decoder, this main location decoder functions by taking 2 inputs on the board and determining the path to get from point A to point B. It then provides the start and finish locations to the logical system for processing. And just like an onion, we can keep peeling back layers of the smart tile. Each system has multiple subsystems. The mechanical system has 3 subsystems within it. Well, 4 if you count the flying machines. We have the chess piece docker, flying machine stoppers, and the signal wirings for them both. Let's look at each one individually, starting with the flying machine docker system. So this has a flying machine right in the middle of the entire system, and it can push our chess piece up to the top. So if I were to input a signal here, we would see this start to fly, and it comes. Once it hits the obsidian, it stops, and we have another piston send it back down. And this would have the tile surrounding it, hiding everything underneath. If we were to pull this lever again, it's the obsidian and pulls it down. It gets signaled to go back down, and watch these pistons on the side here. So we extend these pistons out, and because this observer got moved, it pulses this piston to also extend a signal right here, which pushes the chess piece up 1. So what that means is when the flying machine is coming from this direction or this direction, when it hits the slime and honey to pull or push, the slime and honey of the flying machine are not touching this. So by pushing this up 1, we prevent the flying machines from interfering with one another. Additionally, I have to use a piston with observer here because the entire smart tile has to work around these internal flying machines, and I can't have anything interfere. So to send a signal in front of this observer, I can't have a piston here permanently because once this flying machine goes up, it'll pull this piston with it. So we have to push it back 1 and then use this double piston extension to send a pulse. I found out the simplest way to do a double piston extension is to do a repeater maxed out with its delay. Once the flying machine comes down, it updates this fence. If I update here, it sends 1 pulse, and then a half a second later, it gets depulsed. This observer sees that it gets pulsed. It tells these pistons here to do a 1-tick push and push them out. And then once this repeater loses power, it'll do another 1-tick push and pull them back. So this is how the entire docking system works. And we have a fence on either side to do each half. Next, we have all of the flying machine stoppers, and color coding was actually extremely important for me to keep track of what was what with this crazy contraption. So if you can imagine, this is the final tile that I need to go to, and I am trying to pick up a chess piece from way over there. Whenever I come back, I need to know where to stop. So this is what the pink and the red is for. If I'm a flying machine, I fly past this and past this entire tile, and as I pass by this tile, this gets activated. So then I keep flying, I pick up my chess piece, and then I fly back and I bump up to this. The flying machine knows that it hits a stopper, so it'll drop off the chess piece right here. This goes down, and then it keeps flying backwards. Each of the pink, red, and this pink and red, they are purely for flying past this tile and stopping when the flying machine comes back. Next, we have the dark blue and the light blue. And I did porcelain because I needed something that the honey and slime did not stick to when it was flying by, because the flying machine scrapes right under here. And so how this works, if I activate the light blue, it will push these pistons down to drop these pistons. So again, a double piston extension. You see a pattern here. I can't have anything interfere with the slime and the honey, so I use a lot of double piston extension. But you can see that the flying machine has these two towers that stick up, and that is for stopping them once they reach the tower they need to go to. So the light blue and the dark blue are for stopping the flying machine at its final location. To better show what I was describing instead of me pretending to be a flying machine, I figured I would do a simple example. So if we're picking up a chess piece from way over there, I activate this, and then if I freeze the game to make this go backwards and then unfreeze, we should see it pull this chess piece all the way back. It'll hit this, and we actually have another line here. It's an orange line that would power both of these, but right now I'm just going to freeze the game and imitate what the orange signal does. So if I unfreeze, it will push this out. This drops down, and then if I power these again, it keeps flying backwards. But on the actual machine, I have a stopper behind this, but this one's just gonna fly forever. And then for this side, we would put the blue down to stop it from going forward. And like last time, I'll freeze the game and update these observers. And when I unfreeze, it'll push this guy all the way forward, hitting these pistons right here. And it drops it off. And then if we send a signal on these pistons to go back, it'll go back to the docking station, and this time I added a stopper. And now you can imagine that we have our docking flying machine right here, ready to bring it to the top of the tile. So that is how all these stoppers work. And we have a blue, light blue, red, and pink. And then there is an orange signal wire that talks to these flying machines to go forward or go backwards or drop these off, but that's in the logic. And this brings us to our last subsystem of the mechanical system. And so I went and I added just a few endpoints here so we can imitate the logic sending signals to the wires, because it's hard to understand if you don't see the actual signals. And I'm only going to go over 1/4 of this because this is split up into 4 different sides. This side is mirrored onto the other side. The red, this side, and the other side are actually a little bit asymmetrical. So I built the front and the back first, and I squeezed in the 2 sides with what room I had left. So it's actually a little asymmetrical. I'm going to start up here. And so when I flip the lever, you don't see any lights. And why is that? If you remember on the board, when the flying machines are moving, you can't draw the tile. Underneath here, there's a redstone line that goes to this piston here. And when there's a flying machine moving, this piston is pulled back. So this lever does nothing. But when there is no flying machine, this piston extends. I pull the lever. It turns these lights on. It sends a signal to this piston, which pushes this wood block that now touches this leaf. It sends an update all the way down this leaf. This observer sees an update through this leaf, pulses this piston, which pushes this wood to touch this leaf, and then sends a signal down these observers all the way down to here. And so just to verify, I'll add a new lamp, and you'll see the lights on. What I found out in testing is that leaves send a signal down faster than a line of observers. This also minimized the amount of observers that I had to use, so my redstone lines wouldn't cross as much. So I'll alternate between observer lines and leaf lines. Before we dive into the wires themselves, we need to know how the flying machine is structured in order to understand how the wires talk to it. If we look at the bottom of the flying machine, there's a row of 4 pistons. If we power the 2 outside pistons, then the flying machine will go backwards. But if we power the 2 inside pistons, then the flying machine will go forwards. At the front of the machine are the pistons that actually push the chess piece. These observers on the side will not only update the pistons every time the flying machine moves, but are also critical for our wires to tell the machine to push the chess piece out once the machine is docked. Lastly, on the sides of the flying machine, we have output signals. These are how our flying machine tell the tile if it has passed. We have target blocks in the tile that are waiting for a flying machine to send an observer pulse to them, so it knows if a flying machine is docked or passing through. This brings us to the color wiring for the tile. I'll go ahead and put 2 observers on the side to mimic how the flying machine outputs a signal to the tile. I'll go through each color one at a time, starting with the pink wire. Like I discussed earlier, this wire requires 2 outputs. If I proc the pink line here at the bottom and send the first signal on the right, then it pulls a target block on the opposite side, where it waits for another signal to pass through it. This also pushes a redstone block down, which is used to power the backstopper pistons. Next, once the flying machine comes back, it will send the second pink signal via the left side observer, which does 3 things. It pulls back the redstone block, which unpowers the backstopper. It pushes the left target block down, so future flying machines won't power this line. It quickly places and picks up water from these 2 dispensers to tell the front pistons to drop off the chess piece. And lastly, sends signals to the outside pistons on the bottom of the flying machine to fly backwards. The blue line is used for 2 scenarios. The first is if we are arriving at this tile to pull a chess piece backwards. The second is if we are arriving at this tile to drop off the last half of a chess piece. Both require the same signal to the flying machine. So if we proc the blue line and send a signal on the right, it simply tells the flying machine to go backwards by powering the outside pistons on the flying machine. This also depowers the stoppers on the top of the tile, like I showed earlier. The last color wire we have is orange, which handles a single scenario. This is if a flying machine is coming to push a chess piece forward. If we proc orange and send a signal on the right, it activates 2 things. It places the water out of the pistons to give the chess piece a little space for the flying machine to pick it up. Then we send a signal to the inner pistons of the flying machine, telling it to continue forward.
And just to give you an idea of how the flying machine fits in this entire system, it looks like this. So we have observers on both sides of the flying machines, and then we have observers here at the end for these pistons to push the chess piece into the middle. The blue line powers this piston on the side. If we were to send a signal here, it powers the 2 pistons in the middle. That says, okay, we're picking up half of the chess piece right here. This other half has already been taken. So we want to come pick up this chess piece and keep going forward. So we need to power these 2 pistons here, and that's what this orange line is for. But that's how the system works. It uses these pistons with targets to say what color needs to happen, and when we send a signal through this target block, it will power that particular color to either send the flying machine forward, backward, or to dispense water, which will place the chess piece into the middle. Guys, this is the logical system. There's just no way that I can explain this mess in a reasonable amount of time. I was going to break this apart and just do one line at a time so it didn't look all mumbled and jumbled up, but I started breaking this to get to just one line, and I realized how intertangled everything was. I would destroy the orange line, and an observer that touched the orange line also affected a blue line in an edge case scenario. There's just no way for me to show the entirety of the logical system, but I'll give a general overview. This is where the input from the very top of the tile, it comes right here, and it pulses the piston, and it sends a signal all the way down here. So if I pull this, you'll see this get powered. So this goes all the way down to the decoder. Then the decoder will figure out which direction I need to go. Well, these tiles already have their own decoder, but they're only one dimensional. So this yellow line and this green line are for this axis. But then down here, this green terracotta and this yellow terracotta are for the y-axis. So this is for one direction in the logical system, and then this is for the other direction. And all the decoder does is say, hey, we're going in this direction, or hey, we're going in this direction. But I can actually hard code this to work in just a single direction. And all it is I remove this leaf and I put an observer right here. So what this does is this powers this piston and this piston. And I'm going to copy the top of this. If I copy the top side of this logical system, we have this yellow line that just goes all the way down. So let's say I activate this, and it activated this observer, which pushed this and then pushed this target block. Also on the other side, it pushed this target block down and this block right here. And so what happens is when this wood block moves, it powers this leaf, which powers this observer and powers the redstone line. So watch this. You see it? And what this does is this says, okay, this is powered, send a redstone power all the way down this line and see if any other tile is already powered. When we power this tile, we will send a redstone line this way, but there's nothing over here. And on the back side, because we also moved this wood here, it was right here, now it's moved up, it powered this observer. So this observer gets powered. So say I pull this tile first, this one says, okay, I'm ready to move. When this lever gets pulled, it'll send a redstone line down. And now this repeater sends a signal through this and will activate the entire logical system. So that's how we know which tile is first and which tile is second, because the first tile pushes the wood here and sends a signal that way and that way. If there's no tile already procced, it does nothing. The second tile pushes the wood here and sends the redstone line. This sends a signal here and says, oh, okay, you're the first tile. When this gets powered, it also sends a pulse down this black line, which then sends a pulse down this black line. This one should have a target block down because I pulled the lever. I haven't pulled it yet, but there'd be a target block here. Now, when the redstone line comes back, it hits this pink line and says, okay, you are the second tile. So the logical input for the second tile is here. Logical input for the first tile is here. There's not really any feasible way for me to go through the entire logic itself, but this is essentially how the tiles talk to each other. There's a two-part system. The first time you pull a lever, it says, I'm ready for another tile to talk to me. Once this tile gets activated, it talks to this tile, which sends a signal back and says you are the second tile. Then it starts the whole process, and it's too much for me to go into. It's crazy. The bottom does the exact same thing. The yellow line is right here. The green line is right here. We have the same concept of wood getting pushed, which updates that repeater. And that's the same thing over here. Updates this repeater. If you want to figure this out yourself, you can dissect the whole thing, but there's just no way. There's absolutely no way. This is insane. But what I can do is show a visual of the color order that the logical system provides to the mechanical system's wires. If I were to activate a tile on the right and then activate a tile to the left of it, the logical system knows which tile is originally holding the chess piece and which tile we are moving to. It procs the pink line on the back side of the second tile, since the flying machine will have to move past this tile, then come back with half the chess piece. At the same time, it activates two colors on the original tile, blue on the side facing the second tile and orange on the opposite side. After these three colors are activated, the logical system tells the flying machine behind the second tile to start moving. It passes the second tile, sending the first pink signal to it and activating the back stoppers. Then it reaches the original tile and stops at the blue stoppers. Next, it picks up half the chess piece, starts going backwards, and tells the flying machine on the other side to go. The first flying machine continues going backwards until it hits the pink stopper, where it drops off half the chess piece, activates the blue line on the other side of the tile, and then goes back to the docking station. The second flying machine hits the orange line, picks up the last half of the chess piece, and continues until it hits the blue stopper on the second tile. Once it hits the blue stoppers, it drops off the last half of the chess piece, and then goes back to the docking station. The logical system ensures that this is always done in the correct order. And the last subsystem I have is the decoder. And this is my second time recording because I forgot to hit record. I'm tired of all this. This is hurting my brain. It's just too much to recap, but I'll try my best. So the general concept is we have one single input here that we can turn on and off. And we have two outputs here. This is to say we're going left and right. This is to say we're going forward or backwards. So one input, two outputs. This entire blue line here is just for handling diagonals. Because what happens if I try to go from point A to point B, it's simple. I take one input here and one input here, and I do an output that we're going left to right. So I just output here and output here. Same thing if I'm going up and down. Take one input and one input, send an output that I'm going forward and backwards, and send an output that I'm going forward and backwards. Simple. But if we're doing a diagonal, I put an input here and an input here. So then we send a left to right output and a left to right output. We bypass the docking system, and then we send a forward backward output and a forward backward output. Because the way that this works is whenever the logical system over there gets done from going from point A to point B in any one direction, it automatically tries to dock the chess piece. But if we're going diagonal, we want to go here to here, don't dock, and then move here to here. So we have the entire blue line just to bypass the docking system. To give a general summary of how this decoder works is when I pull this lever, I send a signal out in all directions. So I go forward, backwards, left to right, I send a signal out. So watch this. pull the lever, it pushes down this redstone block, which powers this to go all the way down as far as that direction can go. It also powers this to go in that direction as far as possible. At the same time, we power this redstone block, which powers this all the way down. And you can see it gets cut off because of a repeater, and it gets powered all the way down here. When I pull this lever, it not only pushes this down, it pushes this target block and this target block down, and we're waiting for a response. We're saying, okay, are we going to come from left to right, or are we going to come from forward and backwards? It's waiting for a response. These target blocks are in limbo, and as soon as the signal comes through, it'll push the target block up, and it will send a signal in any direction we're trying to go. How it does this is we have observers like this watching the line to see if it ever changes. So if we get a signal coming from this direction, it'll send a signal, power this line, and say we're going forward and backwards. So if I power this, redstone line comes down here, sends a signal, and outputs the forward backward signal. In the same manner, I have an observer here and an observer here waiting to see if this redstone line ever changes. If it does, it'll power this line and this line, which they come together right here, and it will power this target block. If we ever get a signal coming from this direction, then it outputs a signal here. If I unpower this, let's say I power this one, I'll show you how a diagonal works. This is powered, so it's sending a signal this direction and this direction, and in this direction and this direction. This needs to know it's a diagonal. So there's 3 conditions that need to be met for this to be a diagonal. First condition is that it is not active, because when we activate a tile, it pushes down a redstone block. So this redstone torch is directly correlated to it being turned on. So if this tile has not been activated, and if this tile is getting a signal pulse from one direction, it turns this off, and it waits to get a signal from another direction. So there's 3 conditions. It is not an active tile. No one's trying to move this tile. And I get a signal from this direction and a signal from this direction. What it does is when these 3 torches are all turned off, it sends a pulse here. So this torch gets active, and it sends a single pulse through this target block, which then starts the whole diagonal process. Because these send a signal in all 4 directions, we just look to see where they intersect, and we know that that's the diagonal. Where there's an intersection and the tile is not turned on. And you may be thinking, if we send a pulse in every direction and create a cross-like redstone line on the board, isn't there 2 intersections? And you would be correct, there are 2 intersections, and I had to account for this. So the way that the decoder accounts for 2 intersections is we always go left to right before we go up and down. So that means we only look for the diagonal that had a left to right signal and then received an up and down signal. So the tile that is above the first tile or below the first tile is not waiting to check to see if it's a diagonal. But if there's a tile to the left or to the right of the first tile, it's waiting to see if it gets a signal coming from below it or above it. That's how a single individual tile works. And one thing that I kind of skipped over is whenever we send a signal pulse to go left or right to tell another tile that it's active, when the 2 tiles are talking to each other, it'll also send a signal down here, which activates the flying machine. So there is another signal in the logical system that tells the flying machines to go forward. And this leads me to my next component of the system, because if we just had a board here, all I would need is just a hard stop of obsidian behind each flying machine. And I would need to be able to turn it on and wait for them to come dock back here. But we don't just have a board. We have a board that we need to remove pieces and take off the chessboard. What I could have done is just put the flying machines on the back side of this board. That means anytime I move, the flying machine has to go 4 extra tiles. 1, 2, and then the 2 over there. That adds a lot of time for the flying machine to move. So I put docking stations back here. So this flying machine can be procced to fly all the way back and get docked back here. And this is how the graveyard works. If I pull this lever here, it sends a signal to this wool, which turns on all these lights. Also sends a signal down here, and I have a flip-flop. This activates this observer, which activates this piston, and it goes down this leaf line and then sends a signal down here, and it pushes this redstone block down. So what that does is it turns this power off, which pulls... I actually didn't mean to turn that on, but that's okay. But when this is powered, we have the stopper activated here. And whenever we remove it, the stopper goes down. At the same time, we have this observer pushed all the way out. When we remove this power, it pulls the observer back, which activates this line, which then activates the flying machine to go backwards. So you can watch here. And then you might be wondering what this line is. If this is active, this line pushes all these pistons down, which turns on these tiles in the back. So that means if we don't have the graveyard open and the redstone's up here, that would mean that none of these tiles can communicate with one another. So that's how we close the graveyard and open the graveyard. Because this is a flip-flop as well, when this gets powered to send the flying machines back, it'll push this target block here, and then the second pulse we do sends a signal down here, which comes all the way back here and activates all of these flying machines. So the second time we pull the lever, it sends these flying machines back into their stations. And the same concept is used for the promotions. We have these extra docking stations on the back and these stoppers that can be open and closed, and we send the flying machines to dock on these back stoppers. The last system for the board is this piece here, which it stays active if any flying machine is not docked. And so the reason it's turned on right now is because when I move this block, it pushed the flying machines back, and so they think that there's a flying machine active. But how this works, this redstone is locking this hopper. So as soon as we unlock the hopper, it puts all the axes in this dropper. This comparator is looking at the dropper, sees that it's empty. It's in subtract mode and it's subtracting these axes, and it powers this redstone torch. Well, this redstone torch then sends a signal down here, which makes its way all the way back to this to turn it on. So any flying machine that is undocked connects up to this redstone line that goes all the way back to this corner and tells the player, hey, there is a flying machine not in its docking station. Now to the final part of the board, the automatic board reset. This part was actually one of the simplest parts of the whole board. Since the logic was already created, I just had to hard code into it. How the board reset works is I bypass the decoder and force an input into the front to back redstone line in the logical system. This ensures there's no cross wiring going from side to side, and it allows me to input an entire row at a time. It works by putting inputs on the back row of the graveyard, and then I put an input on the back row of the board, and that way an entire row can work in parallel. Then there's a timer delay, so once the back row is done, the front row of the graveyard starts, following the same pattern. And guys, just a reminder that this world is absolutely free to download. So if you want to try out Chess Valley and see how all this logic works, you can download this world and check it out yourself. I highly recommend it. And if you stayed to the end of the video, I greatly appreciate you. Thank you for watching, and I hope that I can continue to make enjoyable builds and contents like this. Bye bye.